Hello and welcome to Pondering Pop Culture, where we investigate your favorite memes with the scope of science and using just a little detective work. Now, you might be familiar with the question, is a hot dog a sandwich? Now, here's a little meme we can use as a reference guide. Credit to Matomic from Twitter. Matomic. Sorry about that. So, before we ask if a hot dog is a sandwich, we should ask, what is a sandwich? Well, according to this meme, one axis is defined by your rigidity to ingredients and the other by structure. Not pictured on this list are foods that we absolutely do not think are sandwiches, like chicken nuggets. So the purists, the foods that we can all agree are sandwiches, are BLTs. And the sandwiches that really only the true radicals claim are Pop-Tarts. So, is a hot dog a sandwich? Well, let's look at the components of what makes a sandwich. With any category, there are sufficient and necessary conditions. Sufficient conditions for sandwiches means that if the food meets this qualification, it will be defined as a sandwich. But just because the item doesn't have this thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it won't be a sandwich. Necessary conditions are if an item loses this condition, it will no longer be a sandwich. Now, that might sound confusing, but to help you understand, let's look at the components of a sandwich. 1. An edible food. 2. A food enveloped within another food. 3. The enveloping ingredient is split into two pieces. 4. Bread is the enveloping ingredient. 5. Meat or cheese are enveloped. 6. Eaten as a small meal. Now, if we look at the chart again, we can see that only 2 out of 6 of these conditions are decidedly necessary. Everyone agrees that if a thing is not enveloped within another thing, it will not be a sandwich. And we all agree that a sandwich needs to be a food. Well, at least, no, sorry, because sorry. When I was in high school, I sat in between two Toms, and the teacher always called us a Tom sandwich. So is that a metaphor, or is that a secondary definition? I don't know, but we can use this moment of uncertainty to just consult a dictionary. After all, we are truth seekers on a quest for the objective definition of a sandwich. And here. So, we have 2 or more slices of bread or a split roll having a filling in between, but then a part B as 1 slice of bread covered with food. 1 piece of bread. Well, there you have it, folks. That is what a hot dog is. Also, no mention of the non-food sandwiches like I mentioned earlier, so those are metaphors, not technical sandwiches. We did it. We ascertained the correct and objective definition of a sandwich using the power of a dictionary. Sarah, can we cut? Can we cut? No. Just because it says 2 or more slices of bread with a filling of meat, cheese, but then it says squeeze in between others. That's what this dictionary says. So it's not a metaphor. Tom sandwich really is a sandwich, but here's why I said cut. It's because this doesn't say anything about the 1 slice of bread. This dictionary doesn't think a hot dog is a sandwich. So where did you pull yours from? Well, I don't know if Merriam-Webster's is better than Oxford. Do you? But now that I'm looking at your definition, can we pull it back up? Can we pull it back up? Thank you. That's all I'm asking for. It says 1 slice of bread covered with food. So a pizza is now a sandwich. Is that what you're telling me? That's even more radical than a Pop-Tart being one. And the more that I look at this definition, the more I realize that chicken nuggets, the food that I thought we could all agree is decidedly not a sandwich, is a bread with a filling of meat in between. And now I'm looking back over here at Merriam-Webster's definition. Can you pull it back up? Can you pull it back up? Can you pull it back up? Thank you. It says something resembling a sandwich. A sandwich is defined as something resembling a sandwich. What the fuck? Yeah. And right now I'm thinking maybe I could just discard Merriam-Webster's as a shitty dictionary. But did I mention this? I looked this up last night in preparation, and Google gave a different definition, a third definition. Can we look it up? Thank you. It says, an item of food consisting of 2 pieces of bread with meat, cheese, or other filling between them, eaten as a light meal. And I went, interesting, how do I define a light meal? So then I looked up meal definition. Can you pull it up? Can you show it, everyone? Pull it up. Thank you. Any of the regular occasions in a day when a reasonably large amount of food is eaten, such as breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Reasonably large, it says. A light meal. And what is a meal? Well, it's large. A light, large amount of food. A small, big food. A short, giant. You figure out how tall it is. And by the way, this dictionary, it says 2 pieces of bread, but an Uncrustable, that's 1 piece of bread. So does Oxford not think that an Uncrustable is a sandwich now? And is an oatmeal cream pie a sandwich? Because that's what it looks like when I'm looking at all of this. And it looks like to me, looking at this stupid dictionary. No, fuck you, Sarah. We're doing this live. The script fucking sucks. Pondering pop culture, I can't think of a stupider fucking name. And the script said lab coat, by the way. I'm suffocating in this. I'm done. Okay? A sandwich is whatever the fuck I say a sandwich is. I used to be obsessed with grammar. Like, I was that kid who would go around high school correcting people if they said I could care less. Actually, it's I couldn't care less, because if you could care less, then that means that you do care, at least to some extent, right? See, I was someone who cared about facts and logic and what is right and wrong. And the more you learn about rules of grammar and syntax, paradoxically, you sound more and more confusing. I remember junior year of high school, I learned that the grammar rule is not to end your sentences with prepositions. And there was a new kid, and I went to ask him where he was from. Or wait, where are from you? No, wait, from where are you? Hey man, from where are you? And the new kid was like, bro, what the hell are you saying? So I did some digging, and it turns out that that rule is considered illegitimate. But that didn't ease my headache, because who considers what is legitimate and what isn't? Because I was told that ain't wasn't a word, but also apron was a word that came from a mispronunciation about 800 years ago that happened so many times we just said that that was the right word. Okay came from a dumb joke 200 years ago that we just collectively forgot the punchline to. And it seems like rules about what should or shouldn't be allowed are just choosing an arbitrary date a few hundred years ago and saying that anything that happens before that date is set in stone correct, and anything after is slang, which is the reason why our culture is depreciating. But I guess the dictionary makes those decisions so that I don't have to. And then I noticed that ain't was in the dictionary. And then, well, then I had a panic attack. That sounds like an extreme response, but up to that point, I'd lived life believing like there was a structure holding up communication, one with rules and solidness, and then it disappeared and I forgot how to speak. See, I was what linguists would derisively call a prescriptivist. Prescriptivists believe that a rule book exists for a language and then the speakers should follow it. Descriptivists, on the other hand, study how people speak and create reference guides. All right, I'm losing you. Let's say you're walking down a street and you've got a map of the city that you're in, but you stumble onto a house that is not in the map. Now, what a prescriptivist would say is that the only logical conclusion to this discrepancy is to get into a bulldozer and flatten the house. Because, after all, the map is sacred. It doesn't describe the world around us, it prescribes the world around us. It's not even really a map at all, it's more a blueprint. But I think we can agree that this is fairly silly, right? Because the map doesn't show how things should be, it shows how things are, and we can always just edit the map. Well, the exact same thing applies to dictionaries and language. There's this famous story where the philosopher Plato is asked to define a human. And Plato says that humans are featherless bipeds. So Diogenes the cynic went and plucked a chicken and threw it at Plato, yelling, "Behold, Plato's man." This story gets told so many times, but what we fail to acknowledge is that Plato's definition wasn't all that bad. Because the moment you start picking at definitions, they fall apart like scabs. There will always be a plucked chicken, something that technically meets a definition, but we all know it doesn't belong in the category. And that's because maps aren't really that specific at all. The reason that house wasn't on the map is because the map is zoomed out and only shows the necessary bits and asks the reader to fill in the gaps. And that's why we're not sure if hot dogs are sandwiches. We kind of have to figure out the blurry boundaries that the map doesn't outline. And I'm going to call these blurred boundaries the hot dog zone. I guess It's a light meal, but it doesn't have the shape of a prototypical sandwich. It kind of belongs. It depends on if you're a person who cares about structure or ingredients. There are lots of things that exist in the hot dog zone. Is Pluto a planet? Well, depends on if you're a scientist who cares about how objects leave orbits, or a Roman who cares about big lights in the sky that are named after gods. Dictionaries are more reference guides or pointers than objective rulebooks, because if you meet an alien and they ask for which ones the humans are, and you tell them the featherless bipeds, they'll probably figure out that it's you and me and won't go plucking a bunch of dead chickens. Let's imagine you work at a company. You don't really know why you do what you do, but you get paid decently enough not to ask questions. Your job is pretty simple. This chute deposits a bunch of items, and it's your job to sort them. Blue eggs, we'll call them blegs for short, are made of plastic with a crack running through the middle of them. Red cubes, or rubes, are made of paper, so are obviously flimsier, and they have a crack here along the bottom. When a bleg comes down the chute, you put it in the bleg basket. Same for the rubes. It goes well for a few days, but then one day, you see this. A member of the hot dog zone. You're not sure where to put it, so you ask your supervisor, and she says that some blegs are a little discolored, but you can still tell that that's a bleg, right? Well, she is right. I mean, other than the color, it looks identical. It's plastic, sturdy, and has a crack right where we would expect a bleg's crack to be. But then again, the reason we're calling them blegs is because they're blue eggs. This is not a blue egg. But we don't have an I'm unsure basket. We only have these two. So you put it in the bleg basket because you listen to your supervisor like the good little wage slave you are. Another day goes by, and this comes down the chute. Another hot dog. Okay, probably a rube, but damn, I'm not sure. And the reason we're not sure is because we don't know why we're sorting them. Maybe we're sorting them by color, so it should be put in the bleg basket. Maybe we're sorting them by shape and material, so the rube. So you ask your supervisor why we're sorting them this time, and she explains that these items are mined underground and blegs hold aluminum, and this is a company that makes foil. So she pops open your hot dog, and there's the foil. She tells you to put it into the bleg basket because that's the basket that gets sent to the compressor. But now you get curious. So you go back through, and you open up all of the blegs, and you find that one of them doesn't have foil in it. You tell your supervisor, and she says, look, it's not perfect, but 98% of blegs contain foil, so we're throwing them in here because it's quicker than checking them all manually. So you get back to your station, and you say, ooh, if I just work harder than everyone, I will become a millionaire. So says Daddy America. So I'll open up every bleg and every rube and find out if it has foil, and they'll promote me because I am doing the work that they don't expect me to do. So you spend your work opening up every bleg and every rube. And you find this. A rube with foil in it. You go to throw the rube in the bleg basket, but wait, I just called this a rube, but is this a rube? I mean, we can call it a different item, make up a new word for it, but we already have a word for red cubes. They're called rubes. And we also have a word for items that get thrown into the bleg basket. They're called blegs. I hope you can see that there are no true or false ways to organize these items. We can make true or false claims of underlying facts of the matter. Like I can say that it's true that this item is made of paper and not plastic, and it's cubed and not egg-shaped. But I cannot make objective statements on where to draw the boundaries of these items. This might lead you to believe that we can draw boundaries wherever we want, but that doesn't mean that we should. I could say that a bleg is every other item that I see, and the other ones are rubes. But that seems needlessly confusing, so why would I do that? You're just going to give everyone a headache. But you can judge categorizations as better or worse instead of true or false. I think it's better for me to call this a rube because it'll confuse me if I don't call a red cube a rube. But you might want to call this a bleg because it'll confuse you if you don't put a bleg in the bleg basket. Or maybe we can pick a new name for these things. After all, categories are teleological, meaning outcome-oriented. There is no intrinsic, true name to call this. Names and categories and boundaries are social constructs that exist only to understand and organize the world. But also, when we come up with definitions, it's probably best that we all get on the same page, because if I say, give me all of the blegs, and you hand me this thing, I'm just going to be confused and frustrated. This leads us to apparently the most vexing question that's happening in political discourse.
What is a woman? Can you tell me that?
Another fair question. I just wanted to know, what is a woman?
Please, if one person could tell me what a woman is.
Now, there's a reason why this one category has people yelling and screaming, while the category of a sandwich is a meme. Sandwiches are not a political category. There is no government document or distinctive bathroom decisions regarding sandwiches, but all of the tools that we've used so far will still be applicable. The only difference is that there are now jobs and incomes and lives on the line. So, what is a woman? Let's honestly answer this, because this question makes exactly as much sense as asking what is a bleg without looking at why the company exists at all. Simply put, a bleg is whatever we call a bleg, and a woman is whatever we call a woman. And this is going to depend on who you ask. Am I working at a company who compresses foil, or am I working at a company who makes Easter eggs? The foil employee is going to call this a bleg, and the other employee is going to be confused as to why there's a paper cube with tinfoil inside of it at their Easter egg factory. So, if you ask me, a trans woman is a woman. But if you ask most people in this country, they'll say that they aren't. So saying that trans women are women is not an argument of fact, but an argument of utility. Remember, there is no true category, and that includes gender. But we can examine what brings about the best outcomes. So let's look at a few different ways we can. There are 3 ways that I see people categorize the hot dogs of gender, but it's important to remember that all of these approaches agree 98% of the time. Everyone in the conversation agrees that Ryan Reynolds is a man and Blake Lively is a woman. Now, the first is what I'll call the Shapino approach.
Chromosome. Every cell in Caitlyn Jenner's body is male with the exception of some of his sperm cells. It turns out that his brain structure is male. It turns out that he still has all of his male appendages.
Now, Shapino's way seems simple and straightforward. His fiat is chromosomes. But his way of categorizing has hot dogs too. Maria Jose Martinez Patino was a 24-year-old Spanish hurdler who had an external body that completely conformed to a female. And yet, due to a difference in sex development, or DSD, she had XY chromosomes. There were irregularities with her hormone production, and so her boyfriend, friends, and fellow athletes abandoned her. Her medals and records were revoked. And Patino is far from the only woman who has been scrutinized and rejected from tournaments, felt shame over their body, and been isolated from the only community they've ever known. And the only reason she and others like her knew about this is because she was required to test for a tournament. Nearly 2% of people have sex chromosomal defects, but less than 1% of that 2% have discernible symptoms. 2% of the population are members of the hot dog zone if we use the Shapino approach. It's not completely unlikely that you might have a chromosomal defect and never know it. The vast majority of people don't get their chromosomes tested, and why would they? I don't think that it bodes well for society to strip you of being your gender because your chromosomes are hot dogs. And the Daily Wire understands this too.
Intersex people are not an exception. These are people who suffer from a deformity, from a condition. Just like someone might be born with one arm rather than two. That does not negate or undermine the fact that human beings have 2 arms.
They will acknowledge that their definition isn't perfect, but obviously if a woman is born without XX chromosomes, they're still a woman. Why? Well, blurred boundaries, of course. But if I try to say that my definition of a woman has blurred boundaries as well then...
For a long period of time in the United States, sterilization of the mentally ill took place. That didn't make it okay. Skinner versus Oklahoma. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the decision.
Right. I still don't understand how
There's a second approach, what I'm going to call the conventional approach. This is notably very different from how Shapino is saying we use gender, which is based off of chromosomes. People obviously do not look at each other's chromosomes to tell who is a man and who is a woman. You use phenotypes. You might think that you don't use social conventions to categorize people as men and women, but you absolutely do. When you see someone on the street, you have no idea what their genitals are. You analyze a person subconsciously and view every part of themselves that we gender. Women have breasts, rounded faces, makeup, a bright clothing style, high voices, they're romantically attracted to men, short, pink, quiet, emotional. There are some factors that weigh heavier than others here, and obviously, some of these are stereotypes of women, ones that we should push against. I'm only describing how people in the real world identify women. But here's the important part. None of these qualifications are necessary. There are flat-chested, masculine-looking, deep-voiced, gay, tall, loud, stoic women, but those are the hot dogs of the conventional approach.
Your brain automatically sorts all of the phenotypes available to you and marks them with weight. Face structure, makeup, and clothing are usually the heaviest weighted. You'll assign them a point if they meet these qualifications, and you add them up to your little scale of gender. You meet a person on the street, and your brain will automatically say to itself, thin face, eyeliner, wears purse, that is enough points on the woman's side, this must be a woman. This is what is commonly called passing. It's the idea that you meet a sufficient amount of the criteria of the gender you are trying to be perceived as. There are some people you might encounter who meet a sufficient amount of both man and woman, or who meet an insufficient amount of either. If you didn't know who Finster was, and you were told to choose if this person is a man or a woman, most people's brains would just hand them a big old question mark. I had a roommate, a cisgender man, who had a pretty high voice. He fits every qualification of what a man looks like, but if he's talking to someone on the phone, where the people he's interacting with don't have access to all of the normal factors that they weigh, he'll get mammed every day. I was in a drive-thru. It was kind of amusing to see the fast food employee wondering where the cute-sounding girl was that they were talking to on the intercom. The hot dogs of the conventional approach are anyone who doesn't pass, whether they're cis or trans. If you're an advocate of this approach because you believe that people can't change their gender, I need to press upon you that this approach doesn't give you that. It can leave a lot of cis people with genuine dysphoria as they're being approached with a gender that they do not identify with. And I know a decent amount of cis people who have felt ostracized by their expectations that their gender has put on them. Plenty of women especially feel like they have to abide by social standards of gender that they don't feel like they inherently belong to, because if they don't, then they won't be viewed as a real woman. The reason that I'm harping on cis people feeling dysphoria is because I want to press on to the people who say, look, the way we approach gender is fine and has always worked. You're not defending the people who you think you're defending. I'm sure you don't care that non-passing trans people will have an issue, but there are plenty of cis people that you will misidentify. And if you're an advocate of this approach, you need to grapple with that. I just think that we've gotten to a point where we need to acknowledge that we have historically built our society on ensuring that the majority feel seen. But progress necessitates that we start caring for all those that we've ignored on the road to get here. Because that's my approach. Well, not just mine, plenty of other people too. The self-ID approach. This is an approach where you ask people what they are, they say what they are, and that's what they are. Now, if you're an advocate for this approach, you might not be familiar or honest with the downsides, but there are hot dogs to this approach. This is a problem with my approach. These are the hot dogs. Bad faith actors, people identifying as attack helicopters who obviously are taking advantage of the goodwill of others. And sometimes we don't know who's acting in bad faith and who isn't. Just like I'm not sure if a hot dog is a sandwich, I am not sure how to handle this. It seems like the best approach is to call them the way that they asked to and hope they give the grift up soon. This might seem like a concession, but let's compare approaches really quickly. Every approach has different handlings of their respective hot dog zones. The Shapino approach ostracizes 2% of the population and isolates any person who analyzes their chromosomes and finds out that they're not in the sex binary, essentially asking them to carve out their gender from their lives. Gender dysphoria is a genuine mental health condition, and it's not unique to trans people. Cis people who are forced to step away from their gender that they feel attached to experience deep mental anxiety and suicidality. 2% of the population would be subjected to that dysphoria. The conventional approach is probably a step up, but that's only because we don't have stats on who passes and who doesn't. This is the point where I need to stress how oppressive and damaging gender dysphoria is. The realization that people are perceiving you in a fundamentally different way than you are perceiving yourself. I've talked to enough trans people who have described their dysphoria as feeling like an outsider in their family and society and desperately yearning to be perceived in the way they want to. My approach makes bad faith actors feel a little weird. So, when comparing approaches, it's important to look teleologically at what the job is actually trying to do at the Bleg Company, and my goal is the fewest lives lost. And in that area, my approach is the clear winner. And sure, these are all logically valid approaches. There's nothing factually wrong about calling people by the gender you see them as, just as there's nothing wrong about sorting Blegs by every other item that you see. It just seems to be bad. It seems like people are dying, and maybe if you kept calling this red paper box a rube and hundreds of thousands of people died, well, I'd hope that maybe you just get over it and put it in the black basket. So, the answer to the question, is a hot dog a sandwich, is, in fact, a deeply boring one. It depends on who you ask. Someone might say that they call things a sandwich for the goal of knowing what I can make when I buy a loaf of rye bread. So, to them, a hot dog is not a sandwich. But I call things sandwiches because during brunch, I want to know what food I can eat that has bread and meat. So, a hot dog is a sandwich to me. But you might say, not all categorizations are up to opinion. Some are rooted as a fact. Pluto is assuredly not a planet. But no, that categorization is also up to who you ask. In 2006, many scientists argued that it makes sense due to social convention to make Pluto an exception to the rule of the planet. Even though it's not as large as the other 8, there was a genuine effort to just call Pluto a planet. And the other side disagreed and thought it was more important to use mass of objects as opposed to social convention. And if we ever find a real reason for hot dogs to be sandwiches, we'll get in a room, argue for a few days, and then we'll tell everyone that we've decided that hot dogs are, in fact, sandwiches. And that will be true because we decided that it's true. So, Pluto is not a planet is a shortcut, in a sense. We're saying, although there are no factual statements about whether or not Pluto is a planet, since planet is a distinction that we made up, we feel like the best outcome is to say that Pluto is not a planet, and we would appreciate you agreeing with us on this one, because it would make things easier. If you want to say that it is because you want it to, and you can use any term you'd like to distinguish any categories you'd like, you would be factually correct, but it seems rather silly to care more about Roman emperors naming bright lights in the sky than astronomers who are doing work today. And when we say trans women are women, this is a shortcut because, yes, technically a woman is whoever you are treating like a woman, and goddamn it, are they fully aware that they are not a woman to you. You can make that distinction and not be factually incorrect, but you have fundamentally misunderstood the entire reason for language. We should have a clear and concise definition. And you might say, well, my definition is clear and concise before I met all these people who are taking their own lives because of the definition I'm enforcing. Well, if that's the case, then I think you have fundamentally misunderstood the entire point of being human. We should prevent harm where we can. We need to get on the same page about this, and I don't have to pretend to understand you screaming that a trans woman is a man just because you'd rather thousands of people die than alter the definition of a word.